Hi, Hi, everyone. This is Angela Lindley. We apologize. We had a little technical glitch there, but I think we've got it fixed now. Just to be absolutely sure, if you can hear me, can you just give a quick thumbs up so that Carmen can see that my voice is coming through to all of you? Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started. I want to go over the topics that we'll discuss today. I'm going to start out just by talking about what is introversion and what is extroversion. And I'll say that we live in what I will call an extroverted world. During the mid-20th century, our society experienced a shift from valuing a culture of character to more of a culture of personality, and Americans began to focus more on how others perceived them. And became enamored with traits like boldness and outgoingness and other extroverted qualities. And this has seeped into our working culture. And I think many times introverts are left feeling as if they have to act in an extroverted way, or risk being less successful and less valued than their more extroverted colleagues. So in light of that, today's discussion is going to center around those topics. So we'll talk more about life and office strategies for introverts. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a few resources that you can explore if you want to do a little deeper dive on this topic. So first, we're going to define exactly what introversion is. A lot of people may know part of the definition, but there are some subtleties there that often get missed. And if you understand those finer points, you'll be better at developing strategies that'll help you work a little smarter while you honor that introverted temperament instead of kind of fighting against it. So we'll learn how introverts work best. We'll give you some strategies to succeed in an environment that may not necessarily be designed to support introverts. Because a lot of office environments aren't necessarily designed with introverts in mind. We have open workspaces, we have loud, bustling areas. That's becoming more common. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you a little bit about me, just so that you have some context for who you're listening to. As Carmen said, I am a coach. I'm also a writer and an editor at UC Davis. I have taught media writing and public relations, and I'm also an introvert. For years, I ignored that about myself. I tried to push myself to be more outgoing and more comfortable in situations where I definitely was not. But learning more about my temperament really helped me. And because of that, I want to help other people as well. I became fascinated with this topic while I was training as a coach. And I really wanted to learn more about how the two temperaments can work together to maximize the strengths of both. I am a lover of knitting, road trips, and deep conversation, like a lot of introverts, and a disdainer of loud noises, scratchy shirts, and icebreaker games. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that's an issue for me later on in the presentation. So what makes a person an introvert? Well, let's look a little deeper at that. So approximately 25 to 35% of the population has an introverted temperament. I have read some resources that put it as high as 50%. But remember, this is a continuum, and most people fall somewhere along the continuum. No one is, an extrovert to the extreme or an introvert to the extreme. You're probably somewhere in between. There are also other characteristics such as high sensitivity and high levels of empathy that can influence how a person's introversion is expressed. And I want to make it really clear at this point that a tendency toward introversion or extroversion is a temperament. It's not a personality trait. Personality traits are things like sense of humor. That can change over time, but your temperament cannot, because it's hardwired. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. But it's interesting to know that years and years ago, psychologists viewed introversion as a pathology. It was viewed as a mental defect. But modern psychology recognizes it as a perfectly normal part of temperament. It's really about how you as a person gain and lose mental energy and respond to external stimuli. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Introverts are energized by interacting with others. They often prefer being with people to being alone because the energy of other people actually charges them up. Extroverts tend to enjoy fast-paced, sort of surface-level conversations, and they're comfortable being in large groups and talking with a lot of people. Introverts, on the other hand, tend to expend energy by interacting with other people, and so they can require downtime to recharge their batteries. They tend to find surface-level conversation draining, but they can be very, very energized by a deep conversation with one or two people. So I want to give you a really quick lesson on the physiology that underlies introverted and extroverted temperaments. And I will come out and say initially that this is a vast oversimplification of a very complex process. But there are a couple of things that I want you to know about it. So this is a physiological wiring of your brain. Introverts' brains tend to rely on acetylcholine pathways. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter in your brain. The acetylcholine pathways are what introverts' brains use to store long-term memories. And these pathways are physically longer, meaning that it actually takes more time and energy for an introvert's brain to retrieve memories from long-term memory. Have you ever asked a question and, have you ever been asked a question and had your mind just go blank? That deer in headlights look is very common among introverts when we're caught off guard and we're trying to pull out a memory from our memory banks. Extroverts' brains, on the other hand, have been shown to use the shorter and easier to access dopamine pathways in their brain to retrieve information from long-term memory. That is why they may appear to be quicker thinkers. They can retrieve information almost at the snap of a finger. And they can pull it just really almost out of thin air. And a lot of introverts don't understand, or may think something is wrong with them because they don't have that particular ability. Nothing's wrong with you. It's just about how your brain is wired. So let's look a little more at introverted brains. That neural pathways concept I mentioned is important because it explains a lot about introvert behavior. I want to tell you here a story about my daughter who is 8 years old and was given the homework assignment one evening in second grade to tell us 5 things that she had learned about human evolution. And she began to, list off some things that she had learned. And by the time she got to about the 3rd point, I saw her mind go blank. I saw it, the look in her eyes when she just couldn't remember. And she got very frustrated and she started to cry. And we had her go over and work on a puzzle that we were working on our coffee table at the time. And I said, just work on this for just a second. And about 5 minutes into working on the puzzle, she suddenly listed off 3 more points about human evolution. She just needed that time away for her brain to be able to function to retrieve that information from long-term memory. Another thing that's extremely important for introverted brains is REM sleep. You need that REM sleep to cement ideas in the long-term memory. And that may be why you find that you could wake up and know the solution to a problem that you didn't know the night before when you went to sleep. Those acetylcholine pathways in the brain also trigger the body to slow down, and this allows introverts to think about something and really examine a situation. And this is probably one reason why introverts can often sit for a long period of time while concentrating. Let's look now at extroverted brains to see what the difference is. As we've said, extroverts actually gain energy by being around other people. Several studies have linked that to the dopamine function It appears that extroverts' brains are more likely to respond strongly with chemical rewards when their risks or their adventures pay off. Things like smartphones, video games, and websites are actually geared to create this dopamine release in the brain, which is one of the reasons we are all so glued to our smartphones, introverts and extroverts alike, actually. They often enjoy sensory stimulation, bright lights, loud noises, vibrant colors, rock concerts. Any kind of activity that really charges them up like that is going to be something that they may seek out. Risks, novelty. And they usually don't mind attention, which is something that is often something that introverts actively avoid. I'm going to show you a little visual here, which is another way to view how the introvert and extrovert brains store information. So the extroverted brain has a short dopamine pathway. The introverted brain has a long circuitous pathway that takes more time to process information. So let's see where you land. You may have taken tests before and been told that you are an introvert. You may just suspect it about yourself. Because of the online nature of this workshop today, I'm not going to give you the longer quiz that I usually use. This is a faster, easier way to sort of gauge where you are on that introvert-extrovert spectrum. I'm going to show you two groups of statements, and I want you to choose the group of statements that most accurately applies to you. And I'm going to ask that you answer as you actually are, not as you would like to be. So I'm going to show you the first group of statements and give you a moment to read them, and then I'll show you the second group. So here we go. Here's group one. You like to be in the thick of things. You like variety. You know a lot of people and consider them friends. You enjoy chatting, even with strangers. Maybe feel energized after activity. Speak or act without needing to think first. Generally a peppy, happy person, and maybe you tend to talk more than you listen. All right, let's move on to the second group of statements. Prefer to relax alone or with a few close friends. Consider only people with whom you have deep relationships as true friends. Maybe you need to rest after outside activities, even if you've enjoyed them. And maybe you listen a lot, but you can talk a lot about topics that you're interested in. Do you appear calm and self-contained and like to be on the outside observing? Maybe you like to think before you speak or act, and you've definitely experienced that deer in headlights feeling when your mind goes blank in a group or when you're under pressure, and maybe you don't like feeling rushed. So let's see where you fall. I'm going to have Carmen put up that poll, and if you feel comfortable, let us know which one applied to you more. If group one applied to you, then you are probably toward the extroverted end of the spectrum. If group two applied to you, you're probably more introverted. And if you felt like there were an equal number of statements in both groups, then you're probably in the middle. You're what we call an ambivert. All right, let's see what the results are there. It looks like, oh, they're still coming in, but it looks like about 75% of us in this group are introverted. We have about 5% extroverts, and about 20% of us fall right in the middle. Thank you for your participation there. All right, let's move on. Give me just a second, we're having a little technical glitch with the slide. It's not moving. I apologize, we're going to work on this, and we'll be back up in just a second. All right. So, if you're an introvert, I'm going to encourage you to play to your strengths as opposed to acting extroverted because you feel like you have to in your environment. Having a frenetic social schedule, being out and about all the time is maybe more draining to you than what you need for your temperament. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about how you can play to your strengths and really live a life that allows you to honor your temperament. You are probably, as an introvert, able to focus quite intensely. You're probably a good collaborator, which may seem a little counterintuitive, but extroverts in collaboration situations often can contradict and give counterexamples instead of collaborating. And I know, by the way, that I'm making blanket statements here. Obviously, this is not true of everyone, but this is just what the research has tended to find. You're probably a great listener. You may not speak up unless you feel like you have something really relevant to say, but I bet that a lot of you have had your friends say that you're a great listener, and they may even bring their problems to you to have you help out. You're probably a good writer, and that is actually because introverts tend to process information in their heads before they put it out into the world. So you've already started to self-edit before it even goes down on the page. You're probably self-motivated. You're probably insightful and empathetic. Introverts tend to prefer depth over breadth. And what I mean by that is that introverts like to dig deep. They like to delve into issues and ideas before they move on to new ones. And that is that acetylcholine pathway that we talked about at work. They tend to be drawn to meaningful conversations and not superficial chit chat. I have heard so many introverts say that they really, really cannot stand small talk. We tend to prefer writing over talking. A lot of introverts on the job will opt for email or text over a phone call and stop by in person only when it's necessary. Because we're often averse to excessive conversation, a lot of us tend to gravitate towards social networking sites because it's a way to tune in and listen to others. Introverts love to listen. Tend to be low-key as opposed to high-strung. We often have no desire to be the center of attention, so we'll sort of fly below the radar. Even in a heated conversation, we tend to stay calm or avoid the situation entirely because confrontation can sometimes feel really uncomfortable to an introvert. And this one applies to me quite a bit. We often say yes to things when we should say no, and we find it difficult to ask for help or direction. And this causes us to often feel overloaded with projects and deadlines, and work-life balance can suffer as a result. So No is actually a word that a lot of introverts would do well to maybe say more often. Here's something that I took from, I actually adapted a little bit from a book that I highly recommend to you if you haven't already read it. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. It is by far the best book that I've read on introversion. And she writes a manifesto for introverts. Solitude is a catalyst for innovation. Sometimes it helps to pretend to be an extrovert. There will always be time to be quiet later. But in the long run, staying true to your temperament is the key to finding work you love and work that matters. One genuine relationship is worth a fistful of business cards to an introvert. And this one actually made me laugh, and probably because I've done this before. It really is okay to cross the street to avoid making small talk. Quiet leadership is not an oxymoron, and in fact, while we're on the subject, introverts often make excellent leaders. Because, as Gandhi said, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. So let's actually look at this another way. There are a lot of cartoons and illustrations floating around out there that really are a great way of describing what it feels like to be an introvert. And I just wanted to share a few of those with you. I think we all probably feel this way. Sometimes we want to wear a do not disturb sign. So let's talk about some office strategies. I start this section of the presentation out with a list of really excellent career choices for introverts. If you're not in one of these careers, that's okay. There are certainly ways to adapt whatever you're doing to be more introvert friendly, but this is a list of some careers that tend to be really good for introverts. And at this point, I want to do another poll because I want to find out, do you work in an open office plan such as a cubicle? I do. And I have come up with a few strategies to help me concentrate in that environment, but I'd like to see how many of you are in that situation. So if you're comfortable doing so, just answer yes or no to that question.
And I can share the results with everyone, actually.
Do it then. No.
Just let me know when you're ready, and I can share.
Okay. We'll share the results of that one just a little later, actually, because I want to move forward with a list of workplace do's and don'ts. So I'm going to recommend that the first thing you do is organize your workspace. And when I say organize, I don't mean clean it up and keep it tidy. What I mean is adjust things like your lighting. You want soft, natural light if possible. My personal workspace it does not have any windows around, but I do have a couple of lamps. And I use full spectrum light bulbs in those. And that really helps me sort of overcome the harsh glare of fluorescent lighting. I also recommend, and this is a big one, take breaks. A walk, some fresh air, and some time to yourself are an absolute must. This is a great time. If you don't feel like getting up from your desk, then just look away from your computer. You can meditate, you can zone out, whatever you need to do to give your mind a break. And the reason you need that is because of those neural pathways that need time to process the information that you're putting into your mind when you're working. I actually have a Fitbit that that buzzes at 10 minutes to the hour every hour, and I kind of use that as my little reminder to get up and move around and look away from my computer for a little while. I recommend that you use headphones if your workplace is noisy, because this can create sort of a bubble between you and the outside world. You can play music, you can listen to white noise. There are a lot of great apps for your phone out there that will play nature sounds or white noise, because this can really help you relax and concentrate. I recommend that you develop whatever strategies work for you to manage interruptions. If that means hanging up a sign that politely says, you know, please come back in 30 minutes, or telling people that you're working on a deadline, or another excuse that lets the person politely know that you're not available for drop-ins at that point. And then wear comfortable clothing, and this is another big one for me. Even if your job requires you to dress in something that's less comfortable, such as like business wear, you can find ways to make it more comfortable. Introverts are often bothered by clothing that's scratchy or tight or stiff. And so when you keep that in mind as you're shopping, you can select items that are going to make a big difference in how you feel. Because feeling uncomfortable is especially distracting for introverts, and it can impact your concentration. Tagless clothing is great, or you can take the tags out of your clothes. Picking shoes that don't pinch and items that fit loosely makes a big difference. And then I'm going to recommend that you keep a workplace survival kit. And here's what's in that. Hand cream and lip balm, and that may seem strange, but author and psychologist Marty Olson Laney, who wrote another great book that I'm going to recommend to you at the end, suggests keeping this survival kit. And she recommends hand cream and lip balm specifically because studies have shown many introverts have sensitive skin, and they're bothered by dryness in their skin and their lips, and often by itching. So just having a bottle of hand cream on your desk can make a big difference. Earplugs can take the edge off of a noisy conversation or any other distraction. That kind of goes along with the headphones. A refillable water bottle, because introverts are actually more prone to dehydration, which, as you probably know, causes tiredness and headaches and irritability, and it affects your ability to concentrate. And it decreases your flow of neurotransmitters in your brain. Maybe you want to make a playlist of calming music. I apologize, I thought this was already on the screen. Make a playlist of calming music to listen to through your headphones. And then a space heater or a fan so that you can regulate the temperature in your space. Protein-based snacks. This is something we haven't talked about yet. Protein will lift your energy to help you avoid any kind of blood sugar drops that you might have. Protein will help you maintain that energy, whereas if you eat something that's carbohydrate based, which is going to be most of these snacks in a standard vending machine, you may find that your blood sugar spikes and then you crash and you're actually more tired than you were before. So great snacks to keep around are nuts, protein bars, cheese sticks if you have access to a refrigerator, yogurt, anything like that can give you a protein boost and keep your energy level up throughout the day. And then I'm going to recommend that you build in these breaks, like I talked about before with the Fitbit that tells me to get up every hour. You can also download apps and schedule reminders. You can put a schedule reminder on your email that reminds you to take a break, because introverts tend to get very involved with projects, and we work right up until we realize we have a headache because we forgot to eat, or because we've been staring at a screen for 4 hours straight. So just, becoming more aware of that kind of thing can really do you a world of good. Let's talk about some strategies for being in meetings, because meetings can be sometimes difficult for introverts. There are ways to make that a more comfortable experience. Often sitting in a room in close proximity to other people can be difficult because introverts have a larger sort of personal space bubble around them than extroverts do. Also, speaking up in a group can be difficult. Being put on the spot to recall information and then feeling foolish when you can't remember it, or being made to answer questions without adequate time to think about them can all be stressful things about a meeting. So I have a couple of strategies for that. If you have the ability to do it, try to turn meetings into emails. A lot of times things that people call a meeting for can actually be handled adequately in an email. Sometimes that's not the case, but a lot of times there's actually a lot of research that shows that many meetings are actually unnecessary. Arrive early. Find a comfy spot back in the corner if you want to, near the door if that makes you more comfortable. But just make sure that you have enough space around you that you feel comfortable in the room. If possible, you can look over the meeting agenda beforehand so that you can anticipate any questions that may come up. And you can research the answers ahead of time so that you're not put on the spot. And then during the meeting, if you feel uncomfortable asking a question in front of the group, feel free to approach the presenter afterward and ask your question, or send it as an email. I actually find that when I give this presentation, people often email me afterward with their questions, either because they weren't comfortable speaking in the group or because they didn't think of it until after the presentation when they were mulling it over, or as we've said earlier, maybe after they slept on it. Their brains did a little bit of processing and they had a question. So again, I want to remind you, pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Keep in mind that introverts tend to work more slowly and speak at a slower pace, and that's that acetylcholine pathway at work again. You should try to remember to expend energy in small amounts and take breaks to let your brain rest. Otherwise, you risk really exhausting yourself and burning yourself out before the day is over. Try to prioritize things in your day so that you're tackling the tough tasks early in the day when you have more mental energy. Also, I want to remind you that because we often speak slowly and we often pause between thoughts, this can make us appear hesitant to other people when we're really just giving things some really deep thought and consideration. So I want you to remember that it really is okay to just say to someone, that's a really great point, and I'm giving that some thought, so that people understand you heard them, you want to respond, and you will respond thoughtfully once you've given something some thought. In a crisis, take a minute. If you are in a situation where you have to think without pre-preparing or something like that, give yourself just a minute to slow down. Keep your colleagues informed of what's going on, and that goes back to what I said a moment ago. You can explain, I'm just giving this some thought. I'm just giving this careful consideration, and that's absolutely okay. And then I love this quote by Albert Einstein. It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. He was a famous introvert. He loved solitude, and he stayed with problems longer, and we all know the results of that. So introverts do tend to get irritated a little more easily by external stimuli than do extroverts. And so here are a few tips to avoid that. Keep breathing. That's number one. When we are stressed out and upset, we have a tendency to hold our breath. So breathing calmly and deeply helps you focus, sends a steady stream of oxygen to your brain and to your muscles, and it promotes a sense of well-being. When you start to get irritated, you stop yourself and remind yourself to breathe. That's the first thing. Then the second one may seem a little strange. Keep your eyes and your facial expression calm and alert. The reason for that is that it actually sends your brain a message that you're enjoying yourself, and it will actually help to shift your neurochemistry to a happier place. Then notice your tension. Just become aware of your body and see where the tense spots are. Are your shoulders tight? Are you clenching your jaw? Sit up straight and try to consciously relax those tense shoulders. And then I'm going to ask you to notice what messages you're sending yourself in your head, because we all unconsciously send ourselves messages. So try telling yourself, yes, I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling upset, but this will be okay. Just because I'm feeling this way doesn't mean that something bad is about to happen. 4, look at things from a different angle. Your brain likes to group similar experiences together, and this is a tool that your brain uses to save time and energy. But I'm going to ask that you try to notice things that are different about a situation and look at it from a unique perspective. And I'll give you an example. Instead of thinking, oh, my boss is dumping extra work on me because he knows I will work late and get it done, try changing your perspective. Try saying, you know what, my boss trusts me and knows that I'll get this done quickly and accurately because I'm great at my job. Just that tiny little tweak can make all the difference. And then number 5, call upon your own wisdom. Part of coaching, it means that one of the things I often ask my clients is to tell me about a time when they faced a similar situation and succeeded. Remember how you felt in that situation and step into that feeling state again. And at this point, I will caution you, don't try to ignore problems, because until you've dealt with them, they won't go away and they might even get worse. So face the situation, try to remember a similar situation where things went well. Let's talk about other ways to get through your day at work. Lunch, your new best friend. Go it alone when needed. If you're drained, have lunch by yourself and do not feel bad about taking off for a walk, finding an isolated picnic table, or otherwise just getting away from the crowd. Getting that space that you need can completely shift your perspective. You don't need to feel obligated to socialize. Look at your mood and give yourself what you need. Don't work through lunch. So many times I see people doing this at my own office, and I always encourage them to get up and move around. I know sometimes if a deadline is looming, maybe you don't have a choice, but I would really caution you not to make it a habit. Your brain, again, really needs that downtime. Eat well. Again, high protein foods are best for that sustained energy. And then you can, at lunchtime during a meal, add in some healthy carbs like fruits and veggies. And take a break from all digital devices at lunch. And I'm going to fully admit that I am a frequent offender on this one, but the constant stimulation from a cell phone or from social media on your computer is actually very draining for introverts. If you've got to check your Facebook, do it quickly and then take a break, because this is your moment to recharge for the rest of your day. Then, and this happens to all of us, we get that afternoon slump. So let's talk about what we can do there. Again, try to avoid having too many meetings. A lot of us, I know, don't have control over this, and that's okay. But if you do have control, try to avoid those afternoon meetings. And again, with the high protein snacks, keep your energy up throughout the day. Take a walk, even if it is just 5 minutes to walk through your building. That's all you need. Just that little bit of time to refocus. And then I really do recommend meditating. There are some excellent meditation apps that you can get on your phone. And researchers have shown that just a 2-minute meditation has benefits for your brain, and actually long-lasting benefits. So, you know, it is a great time, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, when you start to feel that slump. You can just pull up the meditation app, or even just sit still for a couple of minutes and get that brain break. Introverted people who balance their energy have perseverance and the ability to think independently, focus deeply, and work creatively. So let's talk about caring for yourself when you're not in the office. I want to recommend that you take time every day to wind down. That can be very difficult depending on what your family life is like, but we all need that downtime after a stressful day. Introverts are wired to process ideas and events very deeply and can get drained, especially after a rough day of work, or even something that may not seem that draining, like walking around a crowded shopping mall. Anything like that can be draining for an introvert, and you need that time to recharge your energy. Have meaningful conversations. As I mentioned before, a lot of introverts really are not a fan of small talk. And they crave that meaningful conversation. And if you can work those into your daily life, those are going to be very energizing for you. Contrary to that, introverts also need people in their lives who can be content with the quiet. My husband and I are both introverted, and in the evenings, a lot of time he will sit and read, and I will sit and knit, and we will enjoy being in the same room together, and neither of us is saying a word, and that's absolutely okay. Design a quiet space for yourself where you can go and actually be physically alone. Focus on your hobbies, actually. Even having time to do what interests you can recharge you. When introverts get absorbed in a task or a hobby, we enter this energizing state of flow when you get fully immersed in an activity and you're just enjoying the process for the sake of it. This actually comes naturally to introverts, and it's extremely energizing. Give yourself permission to stay home and be quiet. You don't necessarily have to go to that mixer. You don't necessarily have to go out for dinner. Stay home, recharge if you need to. And then search for a deeper purpose to your life and your work. We all need that, that deeper meaning, and introverts seem to actually rely on it more. And then I recommend you simplify. You don't have to do it all. You can read a good book, you can have a lazy weekend, you can have a meaningful conversation. All of it is good. So I have some resources that I want to share with you. And the presentation, I believe, will be available, and I think these resources are also going to be available in the chat area, but I recommended a couple of books, a few apps that I have on my phone that are really great and tend to keep me on track when I'm feeling distracted. Couple of websites that I think are great, and a couple of videos. I also want to give you my email. If you have follow-up questions, if you sleep on this and you think of something that comes up for you that you want to ask me, I am happy to give you an answer or research and find an answer for you. So my email is alindley@ucdavis.edu. the letter A, and my last name, Lindley at ucdavis.edu. Carmen, do we have any questions?
No questions on chat.
Doesn't look like we have any questions. If anybody has something that they want to ask, feel free to type that in. And I'm happy to answer that here now. And as I said, if questions come up for you later, I will be happy to answer those individually as well.
We do have a question here. The question is how to steer conversation away from small talk.
What I've found, I'll repeat the question. The question is, how do you steer a conversation away from small talk? And actually, that's a great question. People love to talk about themselves. And so I often find that asking someone deep questions, asking them about their hobbies, and then going into more detail about that. Oh, you love to knit. What do you knit? What do you like about it? What makes you happy about it? People, like I said, love to talk about themselves. And if you can start asking deeper questions about what they're telling you, then that has a tendency to sort of steer away from that small talk, which I know can be pretty excruciating for introverts sometimes. Thank you for that.
Another question from Rehana. How to get away from a super extrovert that can't stop talking about themselves at length?
Oh my goodness. So the question is, how do you get yourself away from someone who's extremely extroverted and can't stop talking about themselves? It has been my experience that a lot of times when people are doing that, they are not aware that they're doing it. And this can be kind of a tricky situation, right? Because you don't want to be rude to the person, but at the same time, it is extremely draining. I cannot overstate how draining it is to have someone like this in your life. And it depends on the situation, and oftentimes there is not a good way to get away from someone other than maybe to very politely say, I'm sorry, I need to go, I have somewhere I need to be, and just, physically get yourself away from the situation. But I do have some people in my life that I actually tend to keep at arm's length, and I regulate my time with them because I know that they can be really draining for me. And that's not a criticism. That is just to say that, I have a limited amount of time that I will spend with these particular people in my life. Some people in my family that I know I can only spend a couple of hours with. And so I just have really developed some strong boundaries, and I really try to enforce those. I know sometimes it's not possible, but what I would say to you is to be aware of your own temperament and your own needs, and to speak up and honor those, and just excuse yourself from the conversation whenever you get an opportunity.
Hi, we have a question from DLLISH Dillish. What's the relationship between social anxiety and introversion?
So that is a question that I would actually have to research for you. I am not trained as a psychologist, so I don't have a good answer for that. However, I will look up some resources and get back to you. If you can send Carmen your email address through the private chat, I would be happy to get back to you with what information I can find on that. I could make a guess at it, but I don't want to. I think that would be kind of unethical for me to do that, because that delves into the world of psychology.
The next question that has come up from Mayor Clark: how do I talk to introverted staff without bothering them? I want them to know that I care about their lives, but don't want to bother them.
So what I would say to that, the question was, how do I talk to my introverted staff? I want to show them that I care about them, but I don't want to bother them. And that's a great question. What I would say is, first of all, I would not necessarily pop in. A lot of introverts don't appreciate interruption, especially when they're deep at work on a task. If this is a staff person with whom you have a one-on-one meeting, you could absolutely say to that person, I want you to know that I'm interested in you as a person and that I'm interested in your development as an employee. But I understand your boundaries and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. So if that's ever something that you want to discuss with me, I'm open to that. And so that sort of opens the door to allow an introvert to perhaps prepare for a conversation like that, if that's a conversation that they want to have. And then it also gives them an out if it's not something that they particularly want to engage about.
Okay, we have quite a few interested in the social anxiety and introversion, and so I'm managing that. But we have a question upcoming here, and the next question is sensitive skin something that can lead to being an extrovert? Oh, I'm sorry. Is sensitive skin something that can lead to being an introvert?
So the question is sensitive skin something that can lead to introversion? Introversion and extroversion are temperaments that we are actually born with. They actually have to do with how the brain is wired. There is some research that shows that introverts have a tendency to have more sensitive skin, but that would not necessarily, it doesn't always correlate. And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is actually something that you're born with, and that does not change over your lifetime. I will say that, the continuum slide that I showed earlier with introversion at one end and extroversion at the other, you may actually move a little bit as to where you fall along that continuum at different times in your life. For example, if you are feeling depressed or anxious, you might tend a little bit more toward introversion than you would at another time in your life. But generally, your temperament has to do with the way your brain is wired and stays pretty consistent across your lifetime.
Okay, we have come to the end of our workshop, and if you have listed your email here, I will be sure to forward that to Angela with your specific questions. If you are interested in being added to our list for career management events, please send your email to me in the chat room and I'll be sure to add you to the listserv. I'm also posting an evaluation poll. You can take a moment and also give us your opinion on how this workshop helped. We would greatly appreciate that. Thank you for attending. We appreciate your participation and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.